Welcome to the Resiliency of the Human Spirit podcast, where we share all about human triumphs for the collective's healing and empowerment. I am your host, Priscilla Hanley. My guest today is Melissa Armstrong. Melissa is a mom of two boys, a wife, and a nurse. After her traumatic childhood, including parental addiction and abuse, a school shooting at age 15, and witnessing her brother's death at age 18, the unresolved trauma led to severe physical symptoms. After spending 20 years healing herself, she transitioned from nursing to become a trauma-informed functional health coach. She now guides women in healing through mind-body connection, somatic work, nervous system regulation, lifestyle changes, lab testing, and nutrition, so they can show up in all things as women and mothers they wish to be. Without further ado, I'm going to bring Melissa on right now. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Priscilla.
Thank you for joining me here today. I know you just dropped your son off at school, so thank you for taking the time to be here today. So I am really excited to have you here today because we connected on a call previously where you shared your personal journey with me. And I mean, I'll be upfront, you've had a very intense journey. And so I am very honored to have you here today to have you share your journey through trauma as well as your healing of trauma. Because I think your message is important and a lot of people can relate to your message. And so I will open the floor to you now and have you share your story, your healing journey, and the lessons you learn along the way.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me here, Priscilla. It really is an honor to be able to talk to people like you and share my story because, like you said, it is pretty intense and I have been through a lot. But what I've realized, in the last couple of years is everything that I've been through, it really is a story of hope and like possibility. And that's really why I share my story, is because I want to give other people the hope that no matter what's going on in your life, no matter what's happened in the past, you can always heal. And my story is a really good, playbook of that. So it starts when I was really young. My parents, as you read in my bio, my parents were both addicts and there was a lot of abuse. My dad was very physically abusive towards my mom and my older brother. He was really, had been through a lot of trauma in his younger years and abused himself. Same with my mom, which led them both to start using drugs. And that, you know, what came along with the addiction is everything that you would think of, like periods of homelessness, a lot of chaos in the home, people in and out, really like kind of an overall sense of like not ever really feeling safe as a really young child. Like, 3, 4, 5 was really when it was like kind of the worst of the worst for me. And they divorced when I was about 6, and my dad left and never really came back. A handful of times I ever talked to him or saw him until he passed away, and many years later when I was an adult. But when they divorced, my mom, a single mom of 4 kids, having dealt with a lot of her own trauma in her own childhood, and then with my dad and some other toxic relationships she had gone through, was very emotionally unavailable and verbally abusive when she was around physically. A lot of times she would just hide in her room and come out just to yell at us. It was and that continued really like my whole childhood. When I was 11, I was molested by a friend's grandfather, which was really obviously tragic and difficult. And then when I was 15, I survived a school shooting. My friend was the shooter, a friend of mine. I had a very close relationship with him, and and I had no idea about the shooting, but nonetheless, it was very traumatic. And then when I was 18, my brother, who was 5 years older than me, was killed tragically right in front of me in an accident. So it was just horrific, everything that I had been through. And, I already had a lot of like mental health issues, like before my brother ever died, before the shooting ever happened. But I feel like it kind of like got worse in severity when those things happen. Much of my teen years, I was very, very unwell. I was suicidal. I had a very difficult relationship with my mother, who was really ill equipped to handle her own trauma, let alone the trauma of her child. And I was one of four. So it wasn't like she had a whole lot of undivided time to help me. And she didn't even know how to help herself. So how would she help me? And then, yeah, kind of like when the shooting happened, life got exponentially more difficult and for me. And I really had a hard time processing through that. And then when my brother died, it was like straight downhill for me. I was absolutely I had absolutely debilitating panic, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideations, very, very unwell emotionally and mentally. And ultimately, like I lived in that state of like severe mental health issues for years, for a couple of years. And then it started to manifest into physical symptoms. I started to have a lot of like gastrointestinal issues. I was not able to sleep ever. The panic really was really, really the most difficult part for me because I couldn't close my eyes, because as soon as I did, I would have flashbacks of everything, from a very young age, watching my dad beat up my mom, to the shooting, to my brother's accident. As soon as I closed my eyes, something bad happened in my head. So yeah, it was a lot of really very tumultuous many years, from the time that I was 18 when my brother died until well into my 20s. Somehow when he died, I decided that I wanted to be a nurse. So I started pursuing that path as a student. I was in college when he died, and so then I just declared nursing as my major and started on that track. I've been asked before, like, how I was so unwell. When I think back up to it, I'm like, I don't even know how I got through it. I really don't, other than to say that God helped me, because I was so unwell. I wasn't sleeping. I had panic attacks, like going to the grocery store. Like, how did I manage to go to school and pass with I graduated nursing school with like a 3.9 GPA, like really good grades, and I think in some way it probably actually helped me, because I had something to focus on and I was able to kind of compartmentalize. I think while I was in nursing school, I was like, okay, I got to go to class. Like, I got to get this, and I was almost kind of able to like put the stuff to the side. All the while, it was really affecting me, like physically. I was having, like I said, a lot of GI issues. I was having skin rashes. I was having migraines. I was really unwell, and like seeking solutions from traditional medicine as a patient. Like, I'd wake up covered head to toe in a rash and go to urgent care or something. And they'd be like, yeah, it's get out of the rash. Like, here's a steroid, or here's a cream, or here's, they didn't ask me about my stress. They didn't ask me about my trauma. They didn't ask what I was eating. They didn't ask me anything. And it happened many times. And I remember being at some point like, okay, well, like, why is this happening? Why is like, are you not curious to know like why I'm having rashes, like covering my body, and we're just like giving it steroids and just like, oh, we don't know, like it happens kind of thing. Like, and then when I was about 24, my now husband, then boyfriend, suggested to me that I try meditation. I was coming out of a panic attack, which I had regularly, daily, even, I think. And he was just kind of reflecting to me out of love, like, it seems like you are just really, really like heightened and anxious about everything, like all the time. If you could just calm yourself down, I feel like you would just feel so much better. And like, obviously, like looking back, I'm like, of course, duh, like, but he was in construction. He had no idea, but he said, well, why don't you try? I've heard meditation could be helpful for things like this. Like, do you want to try that? And for some reason, it stuck. I tried meditation and I was able to do it, which knowing what I know now is kind of a little bit crazy because like personally in my practice now, like meditation is not usually one of the first things that I recommend to people because it's quite difficult and actually can create a lot more anxiety and actually worsen PTSD because when you have no experience to quiet your mind and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, go sit in a corner and quiet your mind for 10 minutes. It's like it's nearly impossible. I don't know how, again, I don't know how I was able to do that except for to just give all the glory to God and say he helped me because I think that's what it was. I was able to, and I very quickly realized when I was meditating that I could, for the first time ever in my life at like 24, 25 years old, I was able to calm my mind down. And it just, this light bulb went off. And I remember being like, well, wait a second, like, why does this work? And it's working so well. And I feel so great when I'm meditating. And why has a doctor never told me about this? And what is meditation and why does it work? And what is neuroplasticity? And this is, 15, 16 years ago. So it was kind of like I think kind of before we've seen this shift in the last 10 years of like really a lot more research and talk about trauma and the effect on the psyche and the mind and the body. And so I feel like at that point, I was just kind of like consuming any information I could find about the connection between the trauma that I had been through and meditation and the physical symptoms that I was having and meditation and why does it work and all of those things. And then, yeah, that's kind of like how I started. For me, meditation ultimately turned into prayer. I didn't know that at the time. I was being I did not grow up in a religious household. It was quite the opposite, as you could imagine. My mom was very much God does not exist, and here's the proof that I have that God does not exist. And I believed her when I was younger, because she was my mom. But then things happened in my life where I kind of just questioned and went, is that true? Because it feels like maybe there's something more. And then when I started meditating, it really turned into prayer. And that's when I was finally able to like have a connection, I think, to like my higher self and thus a connection to a higher power. And ultimately it evolved and I came to understand that it was God. And that's when I would hear from God. And yeah, my nursing career evolved. I maybe we could stop there if you want.
Yes, yes. So, okay, let's talk a little bit about your connection with God, okay? Because I think that is so profound. I mean, you coming from a background where you were not taught about God, and then now you're communicating with God. That's amazing. So there are a lot of people, I am sure, in the collective who feel perhaps they're not worthy to talk to God.
Mm.
And so what would you tell people in the collective who feel they're not worthy to talk to God or they can't talk to God directly because it's just too massive for them to even consider that communication?
Yeah. Well, I would say, first of all, you are worthy. We are absolutely, we are children of God. We are created from his image. We all are. And we all have access to it. And people who think, if it's just too massive or they can't communicate with him because I hear from people a lot, like, I don't hear him. I don't know how to hear him. I think the first step is really getting still and getting quiet. And that's the first step. And it's the most difficult because especially in our culture nowadays, like, I mean, we hardly sit down and get still unless we're sleeping, we're dead, like, so it's very difficult, but that's the first step, is really getting still and getting quiet so that you can make the space to actually hear his voice. And when you hear, that's the other thing too, is I hear from people sometimes that say like, well, how do I know it's God or somebody else or something else? I think, when you hear something, and sometimes for me personally, sometimes it's an actual voice, sometimes it's just a feeling. It's not like it's this like other mysterious, like, oh, like a deep dark man's voice or something. Like it's like my own voice, but it's, you know, something I hear or sense or feel, kind of. When you hear something, it's either it's one of a couple different things, right? Like it's either yourself or it's other people, and you know that it's God because God is pure love and pure goodness. If you are hearing something that's based in fear or anger or questioning or something, that's not God. He gave us free will, what you're going to choose and what's going to happen. So that's what I focus on. If I feel like a sense of confusion or what should I do, if I'm thinking about a situation, like I get still and get quiet and I praise God for everything he's done for me. And then I wait and I listen. And yeah, that's kind of how I hear from God.
What messages have you gotten from God or teachings from your communication from God?
Everything. He's guided my whole life. He told me to start sharing my story on podcasts as a message of hope and his goodness. Literally one morning I woke up in January and it was like, share your story. And I was like, what? I don't know, if people probably don't care about my story. Like, and it's vulnerable to share your story. And my personality is not such that I'm really like fearful or worried about being vulnerable. It's just, I don't know, blessing or a curse, but like I've always been like, I'm not afraid of being vulnerable. I wear my heart on my sleeve and I tell people how I feel, and it's always been easy and natural for me. But it's still like the idea of like being on a podcast and like sharing my story with, like, I don't know how many people are going to hear this. Like, that's kind of that's a daunting thing. But I just remember it was in January of this year that I woke up one morning and he said, share your story. And I said, I don't think that I want to do that. And he's like, share your story, go share your story. Like opening my practice, quitting my job as a nurse, lots of things in my life where he's just completely guided various different, even like littler situations, like where everything I've been through, I've done a ton of healing, but like I still struggle with anxiety sometimes, and when I struggle with anxiety and I pray, I feel calm and I feel his presence. And I remember suddenly, oh yeah, God's got this. He's got me. I don't have to worry. I don't have to be anxious about the 50 million things that I have to do and how I'm going to pay X, Y, or Z, or how, like I don't have to worry about that because I trust that he is going to provide, and I trust my path with him. I know for a fact, a lot of times I share my story and the first response to people is like, oh my gosh, like you've been through so much. I'm so sorry. Your story is crazy. Like, and I understand and appreciate the sentiment. I understand why that's people's response to me, but I'm not sorry. And the reason why I'm not sorry is because I know for a fact, like I remember being 3 years old and watching my dad beat up my mom in the living room. right in front of me and my my two sisters and my older brother. I remember that vividly. I also remember feeling a sense of protection, strangely, even though I was worried about my mom and what was happening. I always kind of had this sense of protection. I realize now that God was with me even back then. And I know for a fact that everything that I've been through is for this exact moment right now. I am living out in real time my assignment on earth. I am meant to be a healer. I am meant to share my story. And yeah.
I like what you said. I think that is the key because you're not sorry about what happened to you. So you don't have the victim mindset,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I just want to say we all come down to the earth plane. We are all souls. We're incarnate on the earth plane, and we've all go through trauma at some kind of trauma or another. And it's a matter of whether you can see the lessons in the trauma, whether
Yeah.
you can see the silver lining in the trauma and the wisdom in the trauma. That is the highest way to get through trauma, in my opinion. And so you talked about leaving nursing. So you were a nurse and you decided to leave and start your own practice. So let's talk a little bit about why you left nursing and talk a little bit more about your practice.
Sure. So I became a nurse in 2010. I started my career in a level 1 trauma center in Southern California, working in a pediatric ICU. I genuinely thought I would be there for forever. There was many nurses, a dozen, maybe more nurses who had been there for like 40 years, like their whole entire career. And we used to call them lifers. And I remember like walking into that job my first day, at the very beginning, being like, this is me. I'm here forever. I'm a lifer. Like, welcome to the place where I'm gonna die, and I quickly realized a couple things. First of all the trauma that I had been through was not getting better by me exposing myself to additional trauma. Working in
Right.
a pediatric ICU, like you can imagine the stuff that I saw. I worked there for 7 years. I can't unsee any of that stuff. Some of it was just unbelievable. Like you can't describe the feeling that you have when you have a child roll in on the brink of death, like from whatever. Usually it's some sort of accident, like hit by a car, a fall, or something like that, or even cancer or other things, but like on the brink of death, and literally like watching them walk out of the ICU in 8 weeks or something. Like there's nothing like that. Knowing that you've helped a child live is incredible. But I battled with my own mental health working there a lot. When I became a nurse, I was just then like really kind of starting into my own like true healing. I had been trying to get the care that I needed from the traditional model. And like I already talked about, I was given pills. I was not given solutions. I was just given pills to mask the symptoms as a band-aid. And then I also realized that in the ICU, it's a little bit different, but I suddenly realized that like my job, which I had thought was going to be a lot more of like what I'm doing now, which is like teaching people how to be well and like actually helping people achieve health, was really more of keeping people from dying. It's a sick care system. It's not a health care system. And I was, going through it from both sides, professionally and personally. And that evolved over time. I eventually left the ICU, had various other jobs, worked, lots of different stuff, trying to find the right fit. And just realizing at each new job that it was all the same. And don't get me wrong. So I say this with caution, like thank God for ICUs and ORs and ERs and penicillin when you need it, right? Because like we need those things. And I believe that God gave us those things and the technology because we need them. And I'm so thankful if I'm in a car accident that I can go to the ER and that I have options, right? But I also think that as far as like true health, I think that model is terrible. And I think that it is a broken system that is run by money. The pharmaceutical industry, the insurance industry, the hospital networks, they're all for profit businesses. It's a business model. Mm-hmm. And for them, they're trying to widen their profits. Like it's a business model. And when you look at it from that perspective, it's like, okay, well, you almost can't fault it, right? That's the system. That's what we've created with that system. But I don't think when it comes down to individual patients, I don't think that model serves people, because getting true healthcare takes time, takes education and resources that model doesn't want to invest into people, because that costs time, and education takes money. Mm-hmm. Right? Like it costs money to spend the time with somebody to teach them the information that they need to know about their nutrition and how exactly their nutrition is impacting their health and those sorts of things. That's just one example. There's dozens. Yeah. So I really, in just before COVID, 2018, 2019, I was really, really unhappy in my job. And I had a series of things that happened at work. One of them was a patient had come into the clinic that I was working. I was working in an outpatient, just like a regular primary care doctor's office. I worked in a position where I had a lot of autonomy, but I basically ran my own schedule. Like I had my own patients every single day that I would see for various different things. I worked under protocols and had a physician oversee everything that I did. But it was a patient came in with new onset diabetes, had just been in the hospital in the ER over the weekend, and had been sent home with insulin without any education or knowledge about how to administer the insulin. So he was presenting to me on my schedule for insulin education. I was to teach him how to administer the insulin to him. And in that conversation at the very beginning, I said, did you get a dietitian consult? And he said, no. Why would I get a dietitian consult? And I'm like, because you have diabetes. And he's like, what does that have to do with my diabetes? And I went, what? Your diabetes has everything to do with your nutrition. Like, right. Did you know you can cure diabetes with diet and exercise? And he's like, no. And I went, of course you don't, because they just gave you insulin, because that's the easy, cheaper option than to work with this man and teach him the importance of his nutrition and get to the bottom of the things that are causing him to eat poorly, and teach him about carb counting and teach him about actual like nutritious substance versus, packaged, pre-processed fast food, that kind of thing. And yeah. And then I had a conversation as a result of that. I was very frustrated and went to my chief medical officer, the physician that was in charge of the whole building. And I said to him what had happened. And I said, like, why, how do we send this guy home from the ER without like any, like, how does he leave the ER and nobody's told him? Granted, maybe somebody did tell him and he just didn't remember, but in the moment, I was just so angry. And the physician, the chief told me, oh yeah, we just don't have time for that. And I was just absolutely like, I was seeing red. I was so angry Like, how dare you say that we don't have time for that? And he's not a bad guy. He's most doctors and nurses that work in the system are not bad people. They genuinely want to help people. They're just stuck in a broken system,
Mhm.
you know? And so that was his response. He's like, we don't have time for that, because for him, it all boils down to exactly what his higher ups are telling him, which is like, you have, 5 minutes per patient. Like, they
Right.
have so much responsibility. They're seeing 20, 22, 24, 28 patients on a day, like they don't have time. Which is true. Like, they don't have time to educate him, because that's not a quick 5-minute conversation. That's hours upon weeks, upon months, upon years of education that gentleman needs, you know? So yeah, that was really where I was like, okay, this model just doesn't work for me. It doesn't align with my values. I don't believe in this. And I got out of the system. That I worked a couple different places. I worked for a chiropractor for a period of time. I worked for like a wellness clinic for a period of time. And all the while I knew that I wanted to have my own practice, because I wanted to help people the way I wanted to help people. And I wanted to have the freedom and flexibility to be home with my own kids. I have two little boys, they're 4 and 8. And I just felt like by having to go to work every day, like I'd have to take time off of work to go to their games or their recitals at school, or I wanted to be able to take them to and from school, and I couldn't, because I had to be there at 7 and they start at 8. So it's like there was no freedom and flexibility in my own schedule to be able to be the mom that I wanted to be. I opened my practice January of 2023 and quit my full-time job last August, and I've been full-time in my business since then.
I'm glad you brought this up because the information that you shared about the broken system of the sick care system is very important for the collective to hear. I so love what you're doing in your work because I think you're kind of helping people to take their power back
Yeah.
for healthcare,
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about the programs and services that you currently offer to the collective in your business.
Yeah, so I help women overcome trauma and personal and intergenerational trauma to live, heal their mind, body, and spirit, and live the life that they want. I think that we are inherently designed by God to heal, and we all have access to the information to allow our bodies to heal. It's innately inside of us. I work with a lot of women who have various physical symptoms, from fatigue to GI issues, skin issues, to whatever, mood disorders, anxiety, depression, sleep disturbances, those sorts of things. But a common thread that I see amongst the clients that I work with is people tell me, I don't know why, I'm just not happy. I just, I have everything. I have the husband, I have the 2.5 kids, the white picket fence. I have everything. I should be happy, but I'm just not happy. And I think that is, we all know the answer to what's going to make us happy. You just have to sometimes get out of your own way. And there's so much that goes into that mindset, and there's lifestyle stuff like, taking care of yourself first and foremost, like self-care. I get it. You got kids, like acutely, if they have, like a poopy diaper or starving, like feed them, change their diaper. But like self-care is something that's lost amongst moms. I feel like, how do like so many women I meet, like practice zero self-care. And like, if you're not caring for yourself, who's caring for you? Like, you're busy caring for other people. Like, no wonder you're not happy, because you're like, literally nobody's taking care of you. Like, you have to take care of you. It's your responsibility. So yeah, and I do a lot of, like, I focus a lot on trauma recovery. I don't necessarily need to know all the details of the trauma. I just help process through those emotions that are stored inside of the body. Bessel van der Kolk has a great book called The Body Keeps the Score. Highly recommend that. There's a lot of research, in the last 10, 15 years that shows that when you have a traumatic experience, the trauma is not the event itself, but your response to that event. Your emotion from that event gets stored in your body if you don't release it. And when you store that energy and that emotion in your body, it wreaks havoc. It starts to create inflammation and disruption in all the different body systems. And then once you're imbalanced, you're going to have physical symptoms. It's different for every person. Some people it's joint pain, some people it's migraines, some people it's gut stuff, it just is different for everyone. So I work primarily with women in their 30s and 40s going through things like that, moms of young kids a lot of the time, or mostly in like a one-on-one coaching environment. But I do also have it's kind of like it's evolved kind of into a hybrid one-on-one / group program now. And where I do like group calls, and so there's a sort of community aspect to it. A lot of education. I do use functional medicine testing. So we'll look at, your gut microbiome, we'll look at your adrenals, we'll look at your hormones, like whatever it is that you're going through. After we have that discussion about what's going on and what your goals are, that's how I determine what labs we need. And then I use that to help guide the protocol to get you to achieve the goals that you want.
I love that. So my question is, what techniques would you recommend to us to help to release stuck trauma within the body?
I love somatic work. So somatic is really just like getting out of your mind and into your body, feeling the emotion. So like the first step in that is always awareness. So like I talk a lot about the mind body connection. People just are so stuck in the grind and stuck in the day to day, and the baby has a poopy diaper and I got to do this, and so has soccer practice and I got to take them here and got to get this, like they're just so stuck in that rat race that they've completely lost the connection between their mind and their body. So they don't know how they're feeling inside of their body. So that's the first step. An easy, like basic introductory practice that you can start practicing. And these things are all practiced because like there's some days where it's easier than others. And still for me, like these are things that I practice on a daily basis. The first thing that I generally recommend to people is what's called a body scan. So literally just like sitting down and breathing. So like remember to breathe. And sometimes you can just close your eyes and just scan your body from top to bottom, tip of your head to tip of your toes, and just recognize and notice if you have any tension or discomfort or anything in your body that's going on that's not serving you or not good. And just recognize it without judgment. Just notice that it's there. Describe it. So it's very helpful if you can describe that in words, like what is the quality? How bad is it? What is the quantity? Like, is it hot? Is it cold? Is it sharp? Is it dull? Does it have a color? Sometimes people have, if they close their eyes, they're like, yeah, I have black in there, or I have blue, or something, like what color is it? If there's a color, rate it on a scale of 0 to 10. How bad is it? Just notice it. Don't try to change it. Don't judge yourself. Don't judge the discomfort. Just notice it. And then once you notice it, you can that gives you the agency to be able to change it. So once you notice it, you can start asking yourself the questions about where it's coming from. Why is it there? Oh, I remember I had this conversation maybe it's my spouse. I had a conversation with my spouse this morning and he upset me the way he said that upset me. And now I have this pit of my stomach, dark, empty, feeling in my abdomen. okay, well, like first, like you can't change what he said. Maybe he was, maybe you misunderstood it. Maybe he was being a jerk. Maybe he had a bad night of sleep. Like, you don't excuse his behavior. It's his, but you can't change his behavior, right? All you can change is your response to that. So then what you can do is you could be like, okay, well, what do I know to be true? Okay, well, he said X, Y, and Z, and that made me feel like a bad mom. Well, am I a bad mom? No, I'm not a bad mom. And here's all the evidence that I have that proves that I'm not a bad mom. And then you can start to love on that spot, love on that area, give yourself the love and the attention and the what it is that you need. And then you can suddenly, you're not tied to that energy, you're not tied to that emotion. That's a basic one. Other things I love to do are just breath work. So like I said earlier, like breathing, there's various different breathing exercises. Sometimes you can't identify necessarily. Like you do a body scan and you're like, I have this feeling. I don't know where it comes from. I just have the feeling. Okay, well, just do some breathing or just do some tapping. I love tapping, EFT, emotional freedom technique. The philosophy behind tapping is it's an Eastern Chinese medicine. Our body is energy. We are all energy. Every matter is energy, right? If you have trauma, you have this energy, you have this emotion. Emotion is energy in motion, emotion, energy in motion. You get this emotion and energy stuck inside of your body and it can't flow freely through your body. So the philosophy behind tapping is that if you tap on these different meridian points in your body, that you can actually expel that energy. So there's lots of different information, like there's tons of free stuff. I love that there's a company called The Tapping Solution. Nick and Jessica Orner, their brother and sister, they're amazing. That's their app. I believe you can use it for free. There's some free pieces of it, but I do recommend the paid version of that one. It's incredible. It's like $50 a year. It's so good, so worth it. They've got all kinds of different tappings on there, but there's free stuff all over Google. Google The Tapping Solution. Probably something by Nick Orner will come up. You can do a quick tapping. There's tons of stuff on the internet. You can read about it and understand more of the philosophy. You can't do it wrong. And that will help dispel the energy. Even just like breath work, breathing, just breathe into the area. You don't have to know where it came from or why it's there. Just breathe into it.
Where can people find you if they want to work with you?
My website, holistichealthbymelissa.com. And then I'm on social media. Most Instagram is my platform, but I'm on Facebook as well, Holistic Health by Melissa.
I have a signature closing question here that I ask all my guests. And so I'll ask you this final question for today. What is your closing message for humanity to help in our collective healing and empowerment?
I kind of already alluded to it, I think, at the beginning, but my thing is healing is always possible. I don't care what the circumstance, what the experiences are, what your past was, nothing, none of it matters. Healing is always possible, always.
Right. I love that. Thank you so much for being here today, Melissa, and for sharing your personal journey. Thank you for being so open and vulnerable. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And
Thank you for
so,
having me. Yeah.
thank you. For everybody who's watching and listening, thank you for your time. And until next time, bye for now.